Welcome everyone to our Fall Way event, Giving with Purpose and Passion. You're in for a real treat today because we have three speakers, three women who are passionate about philanthropy. And I've had a chance to see all of them speak. And I think they'll really help you align what matters most to you with the way you make your charitable gifts. And so for those of you who are new to Beacon Pointe, our Women's Advisory Institute in particular, I wanted to just give you a little background there. We started our Women's Advisory Institute back in 2012. And we started it because we wanted to see more women come to the table. And we wanted to make sure we were hitting on all the issues that were important to women. And the interesting thing about being in the wealth management business is that, yes, we manage portfolios and we do a great job at that. But what we really do is help people align their life and their wealth. And that's our all wealth approach. And it's something we wholeheartedly believe in and are passionate about. So today's presentation will be kicked off by one of our passionate women in philanthropy, Jill Steinberg, who is our managing director of our office in the Philadelphia area. And she has not just the passion because of her client relationships, but she herself and her family are also quite philanthropic and have created their own foundation specifically to help young women become leaders. In addition to that, we are pleased to have Amy Holdsman join us today. She's really the star of the show. Hi, Amy. And she has really devoted all of her time to helping people understand how to best align what matters to them with the charitable giving that they do, whether it's of their time or with their treasure and their assets. And last but not least, we have Jade Goodman joining us today. She is my partner in crime in wealth planning. And on a daily basis, we speak with clients about how to use their wealth and think about charitable giving more strategically. So Jade and I will follow up at the end of the presentation for about 10 minutes, talking about how to make those charitable gifts go further in terms of your finances, your goals, and also taxation. There's nothing wrong with getting a tax deduction as well for the good that you're doing. But before we start off, I just want to give you a little bit more background on Amy. So Amy has created her own coaching leadership program advisory firm, Essential Leadership. In addition to that, she is currently the director of the Green Family Foundation in Philadelphia. And she is quite accomplished in terms of both experience in helping individuals, families, corporations. And she is a chartered advisor in philanthropy, a 2164 certified advisor for multi-generational philanthropy. And she's certified in applied positive psychology with the Flourishing Center. So we're very excited to get everyone joining us today. This conversation will be recorded, so hopefully if you know someone that would be benefited by this presentation, you can share it. Our goal today is to help you think about your giving, and we'll do that in an interactive manner, and we're looking forward to the discussion. So thank you, and I'll see you in a bit.
Thank you, Kami. And I am very excited to bring this event to you. We actually did this event locally a few years ago, pre-pandemic. And Amy was terrific and really engaged the crowd. So I'm very excited to bring it to all of you today nationally. Because we are not in person and we are virtual, I do encourage all of you to participate, to chat throughout the session. We'll be looking at it. Amy will do some interactive exercises in a little bit. So I encourage you to talk in the chat, to use the polls so that we can make it more engaging for everybody. The more we hear your voices, the better this session will be. So let me first ask Amy. Amy, you've had a long career in the nonprofit philanthropic world where you've been involved in different segments of that arena. So if you could just give us a little bit of color on your career journey and how you got to where you are helping people figure out their own philanthropic journeys.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you, Kami, and thank you, Jill, for both the introductions and the kind words. I did go back and look at my notes and thought, wow, it was 2019 and how much has changed in the world since then. So I will reflect a little bit on my career journey, and even though the journey was the same, it kind of comes out different each time. So I'm curious to hear what will resonate most this time. But really, for 25 years, I've been in leadership positions in the nonprofit and philanthropic world, generally in the greater Philadelphia area. So my career started, fortunately, shortly after college with an organization in Philadelphia that was connecting people to nonprofit organizations. That was the mission of the organization, was taking people in their mid-career and looking for that third leg of the stool, right? So everybody at that point had some degree of family life, some degree of corporate citizenship life, and oftentimes, and some people might call it middle age, they were looking for something that could help make a difference, and they were looking for further involvement. So my role was both to plan programs for these corporate executives and to help place them on boards of directors. So it was a terrific seat to see all that was happening in the community, in the nonprofit world in Philadelphia, and was there for about 7 years, at which point I had an opportunity to go lead a nonprofit of my own. And so that organization, I led more than a decade, and I was working with high achieving students from lower income backgrounds and really helping them expand their own possibilities in college and career and in life. And like many nonprofit directors, got to a point where I said, okay, I think I've done what I can do here. And I was looking for opportunities to what I thought at the time was sort of be on the other side, right? Which is sort of on the foundation world. And I've come to learn that, it's not really the other side. It really can be seen as a partnership with nonprofits. But as part of that journey, after leading the nonprofit, which was called White Williams Scholars, I did a little deep dive of my own internal deep dive, which is sort of a common theme in my own career journey, which is I became a coach. And I really helped other nonprofit directors and development directors, executive directors kind of step into their power and really understand their own sphere of influence. And it was along that journey that I matched with a family foundation, led a family foundation for about 5 years, built out a portfolio of a scholarship program at that family foundation. And at that point determined, that was about, I don't know, time is ticking, Jill, but that was about 25 years into my career. I think I'm now near 30. And at that point, I decided, what could I do that built on all of these life experiences? Left the family foundation, engaged in the certificate for applied positive psychology, because I really like to learn when I'm in that sort of career transition. And as a result of the program, my capstone program in the CAP program, in the Certificate of Applied Positive Psychology, was building a business. And that business was Essential Leadership. And that was really kind of helping people connect with what is most important to them so that their own philanthropic activities could be meaningful and sustained and really helps them connect to their passions. So it went beyond what I had done at the Family Foundation. It kind of helped work with individuals, work with families, and work with multi-generational families to help them connect with what was most important to them. So that version is different than the ones I've told before, but that's where I am now.
No, that's great. And I remember when we first met, you talked so much about how most of us start giving, whether it's our time or our money, and we'll talk about other ways to give later, based on people asking us, hey, do you want to be on this board? Can you come to this event and give money? Which is wonderful. We should all support all of our friends and colleagues and people in our communities' causes. But that at some point in your life, you reach a point where you also want to be a little more intentional about what you're giving to make sure that it reflects your own values. So maybe this is a good time for you to just talk a little bit about the difference between relationship-based giving and values aligned philanthropy?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I think you make a good point in that we all do relationship-based giving. It's part of being a member of the community. And there's really no value judgment on doing that. And I think many of us should to do that. We have family, we have friends, we have community. And if we're excited about a cause, we want to share that with everybody. So you give because you're asked. And that in and of itself could be a motivation. And we'll talk a little bit about values later. And maybe relationships are a key value for you. And that's how you should continue to do your giving. But in doing that, you may be agnostic to the cause or the organization. You give because Amy asked, and that's fine, but you never really fully engage. And so it comes time each year, you're determining where you're, giving your charitable dollars, and you're going to, look at the list you gave last year and maybe do it a little bit less enthusiastically. But there may be room to continue this. I'm here probably during the course of this webinar today to make the argument that in order to purposely engage, you must connect with your values to the cause and the organization and to your greater involvement in the community. And I think that giving should flow from your core values, because that way you align your skills and your means, whether that's your financial means or your other means, your talents, for maximum positive impact. So in other words, as I talked about sort of doing this deep dive internally, you kind of have to do a deep dive internally in order to gauge externally in order for that sustainment and involvement to be sustainable.
And once you go through this process, which we'll talk about in a minute, you've made the argument to me that you think that this values aligned giving is more impactful to both the person giving as well as to the organization receiving. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we're talking really about the head and the heart here. So I've heard a quote that philanthropy can be seen as the intersection of the soul and the business plan, right? So what that really means, it's the heart and the head. We strive for the philanthropy to be strategic, but we also believe it's most fulfilling when it's grounded in our values. So again, if we give from that place, it's likely to be more sustainable. We go beyond writing a check. Should we show up at an event? We tend to bring our whole selves, and that can oftentimes include a bigger check, our time, and then our networks can follow. So I think why it's more impactful for us when we get involved is because core values, and I kind of want to emphasize this point, is that what core values really are it's your personal beliefs, right? It's what you stand for. And it's on what you will not compromise. It's sort of what you stand for on which you will not compromise. So if you're showing up for something that's aligned with your core values, you believe in it, you're going to show up, you're going to engage, you're going to get excited by it. You're not going to look at it as like, I got to go to a board meeting tonight, right? It's something that you're really going to stand for. And then the organization benefits because you're giving your whole self, right? So again, you might give that bigger check, it's more personally fulfilling for you, so you're going to tend to give more. So it's a win-win.
Yeah. Oh, that's for sure. Yeah, because definitely I feel as if I've done it both ways, and and both ways are great. But when you really feel it, you are more engaged and passionate, and it's the whole thing when you're on the other side as an organization, or a fundraiser, which you have been as well. It's, you have to get over I'm asking people for money and change your mindset to say, I'm giving people the opportunity to make an impact in something they care about. That's subtle. Okay, well, can you walk us through verbally, we'll get into the exercise later, just sort of when you work with clients, what is the process you take them through, big picture, to help identify and crystallize their values?
So that's a good question. We're going to walk through it, as you say, sort of verbally right now, and then hopefully we'll have a chance to really demonstrate what that looks like in practice. But not to overemphasize this point, we start with values. So we start with asking the question, what's important to me? And as much as it seems like people may walk around and say, like, I know my values, oftentimes I've worked with many people who are very successful in business and very successful in their lives, but never really sat down and articulated and prioritized their values. So we start with what's important to me, and that's a values exercise. That's step one, and that's what I think we'll really be able to get into a little bit today, at least a teaser of what that process looks like. And then, that helps really determine where you want to make an impact and how you want to make an impact in the community. We also then do a process where we get a little bit into strengths, your own personal strengths. So you've got your values, what manifests for you internally, and then you've got your strengths, what manifests for you externally. And oftentimes your strengths is what people see and they observe about you. And so we do a deep dive there so that we sort of look at the holistic person and what they might want to bring to the table of a nonprofit. Look, when I was working at a nonprofit, we often said that there was many board members who checked their business hat at the door, and they showed up at the board of directors table, but they weren't really bringing all their talents to bear. And so the strengths piece helps people really focus on what they have to bring. And then we kind of do a match on where people want to make an impact. So where are the needs in your community? Where is it that you can affect change and make a difference? So we've now done the internal deep dive, and now we look externally to see where there's that match. What organizations speak to you most? And the second piece of the external deep dive is like, where do I engage? So there are a lot of ways to try things out, right? You can just show up. You can show up at an event. You can volunteer at something. If you've got a walk or a run or a gala, you can volunteer, and you can kind of try out organizations that you hear from your friends are good organizations, right? There's ways to try that out. You can serve on a board of directors. You can serve on a committee. So there's really ways to step out of your comfort zone and try out where you can sort of bring your core values and your strengths to bear. So you kind of create a unique plan for that engagement after going through those 4 steps. The 4th step is really, what is my plan to engage now that I have some clarity on what I bring to the table?
So if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're saying is if my strength, for instance, is finance, and Jane's strength is marketing. That's what she brings to the table. But my passion is educating, young children in underserved communities. You would then find an organization that does that and offer your talents either through finance or through marketing or fundraising or whatever.
Sure.
Is that an example of something?
Yeah. I mean, oftentimes people think like, if I go do that organization, they might want me for one reason or another, right? But you can actually bring the talents that you have and that are your strengths to bear, whether it's, on a certain committee or on that board, and you can do it for the cause that you're most passionate about.
That's great. And what I'm also hearing from you is you really can be any age, right? Younger people often feel they're not needed, or they don't have the money, but yet they have talent and time to give, which we'll get into. But so I think that's the other thing. As you grow professionally and you grow age-wise, do you do these exercises at different points in your life? Do you recommend?
I think yes. And it depends, right? So if you're going to do, your individual pursuits, you can kind of check your values and you might embody, I'm going to show you a slide that has, somewhere between 24 and 28 values on it. And you might say they're all important to me, but at different points in your life, you may prioritize different values. And so what shows up as family number 1 at a certain point in your life may of course be really important to you, but there may just be a different point in your life where community really surfaces as one of your top 2 values. So I definitely recommend that. I would also say, I've done this work with couples, and it may be the first time they've ever had a conversation about what their core values are. I've done it many times where it's like, well, I didn't realize that was important to you, or that helps explain, right, that, this quality or this trait that I see in you, and it sort of makes a lot of sense to me now. So there's moments to do this as an individual. There's moments to do this as a family, and there's moments to do this with members of your community. So let's say you're in a giving circle together. There's lots of opportunities to really sort of sit down and hone in what your core values are. It doesn't go that way.
Well, I'm sitting here listening to you and thinking about what we do at Beacon Point, because we have our all wealth process, which is all about aligning your wealth with your values and meeting you wherever you are along life's journey. And for those of you out there that are our clients, we do take you through that process of identifying your values. And during our financial planning process, I'm seeing some parallels because we sit down and have clients look at their expenses, for instance, and then, what are they? And then we need to figure out what they should be going forward. But we ask people to take a look at what they are. And sometimes people have never sat down to do that, especially as you say, if there's a couple, people, not both members, both members of the team have done that. And then to really look and say, am I spending money on things that are important to me, similar to am I spending my philanthropic time and dollars on what's important to me, and then you look forward to what any changes. So interesting parallels, being that I always have my financial advisor hat on. Anyway, this is probably a good time to segue into your exercise. And then we can, if anybody has questions, we'll monitor the chat. Please, we want to hear your voices during this next part of the presentation. So Amy, I'll turn it over to you and you can lead.
Great and wonderful. And don't go far because there's a few questions that I'll probably toss back your way while we're discussion. So this is, as both Kami and Jill said, sort of will work best when most interactive. So we're going to launch a few polls. The polls will be anonymous. You don't have to put your names to anything, but I'm going to ask a few questions to gauge where this group is, since I can't see anybody, but I'll just sort of use these methods to engage. So the question that I really want to ask first is, who gives? Right? So what does it mean to give? When it comes time to think about our charitable giving, we often think about, where do I write the check? What organizations am I going to support this year? We may have a charitable budget and we want to stick within that budget. And then we sort of scramble each year. Well, who did I give to last year? But I'd like to encourage you to think more broadly. And this is where I would like to launch the first poll about, how do you give? Do you volunteer your time? Do you serve on a committee or a board? Do you donate money, or do you donate other in-kind support? Do you attend fundraisers, galas, charities, charity walks, bike rides, tournaments? How do you give? And I love that you're all answering. They're going to make my job so much easier. As I see some of this coming in, I see so many of you donate funds, right? That's obviously the number one way that you choose to give. A lot of people volunteer their time. Many of you attend fundraisers. We could end the poll here and we could sort of share these results with everybody. And again, if you didn't get a chance to answer, it's okay. We've got a lot more polls coming. We just wanted to get a quick beat on where you were. So, as you see, most of you who give by donating funds, right? That's the number one way. But there's also, I'm going to make this point throughout the presentation, is that giving means giving all of yourself. And that's the time, the talent, the treasure, and the ties, and we'll dive more deeply into what that means. So now I'd like to ask another question, and there'll be another poll going up. Who is having or has had or is having a positive experience with your involvement? So you can think about my last volunteer experience, the last time I wrote a check, what's working for you? This is maybe where I'll be able to ask Jill a question, if you're willing to be my person here who I'm communicating with, which is, have you had a positive experience with your volunteering, with your board experience, and tell me why? What's positive about it?
Are you asking me that now?
I'm asking you that now.
Oh, okay. So I would say, for me, the most positive has been through the foundation that I co-founded, Live Like Blaine. For me, the most positive has been interacting one-on-one with the kids we serve and seeing the difference, the impact that we're having on their lives, and giving them access and opportunities that they might not necessarily have had. I would say I'm also very passionate about women and leadership. So this is sort of an investment in the future for me personally, for the girls. I've served on several boards over the years. And in my early days, I just wanted to get on a board. I was young. I wanted, to get involved in the community. And honestly, some of it was for my career. And some of it is just because I do like to give back and be involved in the community. So I was involved in a nonprofit that I was half passionate about, I would say. But I gave my time. I served on the investment committee, the finance committee. But after a few years, it didn't grab me, and I didn't love going, and I moved on to something else. And I think that's okay to move on to something else. And like, maybe with every job you have, every internship you have, it's important to learn what you like and what you don't like. And both are good because they ultimately lead you to where it is more fulfilling, I would say.
Absolutely. And I think we talk about that, where there's alignment across, sort of what you do and what I do, and sort of like if your values are aligned, right, that leads to more positive experiences. We can publish the results of this poll, which many of you say, you're having a great experience, the majority, 60%. Some of you say it could be better. Got a couple people, or maybe just one person that says it's not going so well. So that's what we'll explore now. The next question is, who is having or has had less than satisfying experience? And this is where we're not going to do a poll, but we're actually going to do a chat. And I'd love to kind of get your experience. You don't have to name any names. You don't have to name the organization or people, but like, what isn't going well? And if only one person says it's not going well, maybe that's that one person we want to hear from. But we also want to hear from others who might have less than satisfying experiences. So I'll give it a minute, and I hope to hear from a few people. And if we don't, was there anything, Jill, that may, you talked about sort of a meh, where you might have had a little bit of passion. Was there anything that just didn't go well for you?
It didn't go well at all. I would say I really haven't had any that just flat out didn't go well. But early on, I was involved, and I don't want to name the charity. It's a big health organization that I was asked to join by someone that I knew for a specific purpose, because I was in the finance field. And it just, like, I didn't love going. I didn't feel, it wasn't my thing. It was a great organization, but I just also felt I could be used better elsewhere. I would say that, being on the flip side, I have heard, and I'm learning also as someone who works at who runs a nonprofit, is that sometimes our board members feel that we're not engaging them enough, for instance. So a lot of times you want to be engaged and you're not being engaged. And there, I think you need to step up, say something, step up and say something about that.
Yeah, I think I would say that some people are echoing your comments in the chat that we're asked to do a lot, and some feel like they may not be making a difference, or sometimes their skills aren't well matched to what the needs are in the nonprofit organization. So you're kind of sitting around wondering, what is it that I can really do here to make a difference?
Right. And if you volunteer because you want to give your time and then no one asks you to do anything, that's really not a fulfilling use of your time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And
Mimi, I'd add that sometimes you have to really look at the stage of life you're in and determine how much you can really do. I know that I had a great experience serving on a board until life kind of took over with work and my children getting older. And it was really hard for me to give that up, but I knew that there would be a later time for that. So I think the season of life really matters too.
I absolutely agree. There was moments, so early in my career, I was putting people on boards of directors. And so I too wanted that experience. And it was very young. And I was serving on the boards of 2 organizations that were dealing primarily with food insecurity. And I could show up and I had a lot of energy. I certainly didn't have a lot of money. But I had the time and I had the interest and I had the talent to kind of bring my own energy and leverage some networks to bring to the table. But then when I started having children of my own, I had less time and sort of had to step back. So I certainly believe the seasons of life really make a difference. You're really giving some great comments in here. It's wonderful. I hope you guys are being able to read each other's comments because, different experiences, it shows what's frustrating. So someone says it's frustrating when the organization has run the same event for many, many years, right? Like maybe it's time for the organization to think more broadly and where they could be more relevant to, today and maybe adapt according to the times. I think that's helpful. Some of you have commented on organizational leadership, and that's important too, right? As we go through some of these values, the cause might resonate with you, but the way the organizations run or the way a board meeting is structured may really be sort of against sort of the way that you like to operate in this world. So keep commenting. I would make this point that once we align our passion and our purpose, we can indeed make a meaningful and measurable difference for the causes that matter to us. So with a little bit of time that we have sort of here in this middle of our time together today, I would like to explore if we could advance the slide. Just sort of made that statement. If we could advance the slide to sort of what matters most to me. If you just want to sort of pop in the chat, sort of what matters most to you. And, again, that could mean relationships. That could be, for me, if I was to talk about what was most important, I would talk about making a connection. I talked about those organizations that were dealing with food insecurity. For me, I'm incredibly attracted to logic. And so if there's food going to waste and there's people that are hungry, it was sort of one of the easiest decisions I've ever made is to get involved with an organization that's addressing food insecurity. Making connections, being with people, that's also really important to me. Using my own skills, making a difference, right? Like it seems silly. Oh, maybe it's not silly, but it sort of seems like a lot of people say that. But when people say they want to make a difference, that's truly resonates for them. What I'll do now, again, just to be mindful of time, some of you said solution-oriented, making connections, the outcome, right? Recent Pennsylvania elections, something like that, right? Outcome, making an impact is all really important. So if we can put up the next slide, which is probably the critical slide for us to kind of focus on. You can see many versions of this, and this will be a leave behind. There'll be a few leave behinds for you, and they will be sent in an email after this session. Here is a list of values. It's not the only list of values. It's not an exhaustive list of values, but it's a list of values to give you a sense of what this exercise looks like. I'd like everybody here to just spend a minute looking through these values, reading the definitions, knowing that you could change the definition if this definition doesn't resonate for you, and circle your top 3 to 5 values, right? This is the exercise that I take my clients through. And when you do that, we can just sort of reflect on that. And if you want to, at the moment, look through your top 3 to 5 values and then maybe enter in the chat when you have a minute, if that's comfortable for you, saying what those top values are. We can get into a little bit more of how this exercise works and ask a few follow-up questions. So again, take a look at the values, be reflective. You might say they're all important, but which ones really stand out to you? And then, because I have Jill on the line, I will put her on the spot, and I'll ask you to reflect and maybe share what those values are.
Sure. For me, I would say community would be number one. I do like to feel a meaningful connection with multiple communities, whether it's work people, my personal or my local geographic community. Leadership, I like to, I think that's important. An opportunity, I would say, helping others advance.
Great. We're going to ask a couple of questions. So I may ask them of you, but we're also going to ask them in the poll. And so the next poll can come out, which really talks about why did you choose these values? And you can really see that some of the answers are my job, my family, my community, my education, my upbringing, right? So our values are sort of formed during the course of our lives. And so what really does shape your values? Do you have any comments about sort of where you might see your values show up? And that too is a question maybe, Jill, if we want to sort of talk about, but yeah, I mean, I'm seeing right now, just to kind of give you back. Oh yeah, if we can leave up the values page, if that's possible, everyone has the poll, but if we can leave up the values page itself so everyone can continue to look at it. I think what's interesting is it resonates different for everyone, right? So I see community, integrity, impact, personal growth. What drives you? Somebody who's driven by personal growth may, in fact, want to continue learning. They might be inspired, like I am, to collect as many certificates as they can because they want to keep growing and learning. If they're driven by impact, they might want to get involved with a nonprofit organization that really does measure their outcomes, right? And then you can sort of have a measurable impact. They would be less comfortable with just saying, yeah, whatever, we know we're making a difference. We're not really going to want to measure that, right? Safety. You might make different choices about your own personal safety, about the safety of your family, about the safety of democracy. You know, there's so many ways that you could sort of articulate what these values are. Courage, equality, freedom, spirituality, impact. So you kind of see that even though you might look at the sheet and it may be obvious to you what your values are, that everybody's has a unique, imprint. So it makes, when you choose your top 3 to 5 values, you're really forcing yourself to prioritize what's important to you and how you're going to navigate through some of these decisions, particularly around your own philanthropic involvement.
So are these values, how do you then say, these are my values, and then find organizations that, are you looking for organizations that reflect those values? Or how does that transition from these are my values to that's what I'm going to do next with that knowledge, to be intentional?
Yes, it almost feels like I planted that question for you, Jill.
You
So I think that, and we didn't. So I think that's a great point. So, when we talk about, how your values show up, like, what do we do with this information, right? So a little bit, since we're sort of speeding through, this is sort of a speed course in sort of articulating your values and then using them. Perhaps we can move to the next slide, which is sort of how to engage. And this is where we come back full circle to the 4 T's, right? So when we talk about your values and your intention, how does that really show up in the way that you choose to engage? And Jill, I think this comes back to what you said about what you do with your clients, is you kind of talk about budgeting, but then you look back and then you look forward. So we talk about, just to articulate what these 4 T's are: time, it's what's valuable to you. It's where you show up. It's where you might volunteer. When you talk about talent, it's what you said, Jill. It's sort of like if you have marketing talent or financial talent, it's like making sure that you bring that to the table. Your treasure is really the check that you're writing, the resources, the financial resources that you're bringing to the table. And then your ties are like, if you're so excited about something and you want to tell everybody, it's telling your network, it's engaging your friends, it's bringing them to the event, it's telling them about the organization, it's getting your friends to write a check. So what have you done with that during the year? So the last slide is sort of going to be my leave behind, which is one more slide to advance, which is sort of how to engage with the 4 T's. This will be your leave behind. If you were to do this, I would suggest doing this exercise twice, which is looking back at this past year. How did you spend your time? Where did you engage your talent? Where did you bring your friends, and what did you do with sort of your network? And then where did you give your money? And then as you sort of evaluate your values, as you've articulated them and prioritize them, I would sort of overlay those values. Was the way that you spent your time, talent, treasure, and ties in line with your values? Did you show up? If impact, justice, and equality showed up as your top 3, is that really where you're spending your time? Whether the organizations themselves articulate those values, or if they're their outwardly facing values, are these organizations committed to justice, equality, and impact? And then I would do the exercise moving forward. Where do you want to spend your time, talent, treasure, and ties? Does this give you an opportunity to really be more intentional and purposeful about where you choose to spend these 4 T's? So again, super quick. This isn't intended to mean, I would say the values exercise, you really don't want to overthink it. So the way that we did it is not that different from where you would, how you would do a values exercise moving forward. But then you go back and reflect, are these really my top priorities? Is this really where I want to spend my time, talent, treasure, and ties moving forward? It's just a bit of a taste of the way that I would suggest beginning the process of more purposefully engaging in the community.
Wonderful. And we'll have this available to people as needed. Amy, that was wonderful. Thank you. And I hope, obviously, this was just a quick discussion of this. We could spend hours on this, as Amy does with her clients. But hopefully what the intention of this, our goal was to have each of you on this call to expand your thinking about philanthropy and giving and how you're spending your time and your treasure and your talents and your ties, and whether they are aligned with your values, and hoping that these exercises will then lead you to be more intentional with all of those 4 T's. And so thank you, Amy, that was wonderful. We appreciated you giving us that different way of looking at this. Before we turn it over to Kami and Jade, I want to make an exciting announcement. Last year, Beacon Pointe funded a charitable foundation, and we have spent this past year doing exactly what Amy just discussed, which is looking at our firm. So instead of looking individually, we looked collectively at our firm and what our core values are. And we had a committee that I was involved with, and we came up with 5 core focus areas that reflect Beacon Pointe's impact initiative. And those are women's empowerment, veterans issues, financial literacy, food and shelter insecurity, and uplifting less advantaged youth. And we then asked people to suggest organizations in each of those categories, and our committee evaluated the organizations. We looked at what they were doing. We specifically wanted this year in particular to start with organizations that were doing, having a national impact, doing programming nationally. And we also looked for ones where we could potentially have our team members volunteer with these organizations. So drum roll, please. We are excited to reveal our inaugural recipient organizations, and we're really excited and proud of the work that we've been doing. These organizations will all receive funds in 2022, and we hope to work with our local teams across the country to have them consider these worthy organizations for volunteer opportunities for either our annual or monthly service initiative here at Beacon Pointe. So for women's empowerment, it's Girls on the Run, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. For veterans issues, it's the Intrepid Fallen Heroes Fund, which helps build trauma centers for PTSD and mental health issues for our veterans. Junior achievement in the financial literacy sector. Covenant House for its food and shelter insecurity, and Team Impact, uplifting less advantaged youth. Team Impact pairs children who have disabilities or chronic illnesses or acute illnesses with college teams, sports teams, providing benefit to both those children, their families, as well as the college students on the team. So we're very, very excited. You are the first people to hear this news. So thank you. All right, and with that, I will turn it over to Kami and Jade.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Jill. I'm really excited about the conversation we just had and the takeaways that we can all use to start thinking about this again. I definitely took some new nuggets out of this, even though some of the presentation, I've worked with Amy before, as your life changes, your values change too. So I think it's something worth looking at, several different times. It's not something one and done. So in the next 10 minutes, Jade and I, so Jade Goodman, hello. Jade is one of our attorneys that's part of our wealth planning team. She is the Director of Strategic and Legacy Planning. And so she spends her time talking to clients about how to align their goals and values and how to look at their estate planning, the giving they make during life as well. So our focus today isn't so much on the giving of your time. We wanted to really focus on when you give assets, how to do so in such a way that makes sense for you financially, for your goals, and also to potentially get a tax deduction, because there's nothing wrong with also, of course, getting a tax deduction. That just means you have more resources to share with your family and your community and the charities that matter to you. So to set the stage a little bit, I wanted to share with you how we think about giving. There are a couple of different baskets and categories of gifts. By far, the most common type of gift that our clients make is the direct gift, which is, writing a check to their favorite charity, or potentially, it may be giving something that's tangible. Maybe it's a work of art that you give to your local museum, but it's something that's directly given with no strings attached. But there's a lot of benefits to also planning your gifts. So planned giving, Jade's going to get into that in just a moment, is really being more strategic about how you give. The other way of thinking about giving is that there's giving that you participate in during your lifetime. And then for many people, because they're not sure what they can afford to give, the majority of their giving may be after they've passed away. So gifts set up in a will or trust. So these are all topics that our advisors, speak with their clients about, and also Jade and I speak with clients about as well. And so Jade, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Do you mind talking about what you think of and some of the challenges that you see with clients? Oh shoot, Jade, your mute might be on. Let's see, something is going on.
Can you hear me now? Famous words in the webinar world. So our clients have a desire to help worthy organizations, but they don't always know where to start. So the first half of this presentation, we really focus on, your purpose, your passion, and we want their philanthropic intentions to be driven by their desire to give, but also we want, if possible, to recognize any potential tax benefits. Bank of America released a 2021 study on charitable giving by affluent households. What I really took away from this is about half of it relates to who to give to, but the other half relates to understanding how much they can give and structuring those gifts in the most tax efficient manner. So many of our clients don't know that their advisors can help them maximize their charitable impact. And in many cases, this will save them time, frustration, and money. So through Beacon Pointe's life and legacy planning, we can really help overcome these challenges. We provide a deeper discussion and understanding of what's important to them and the options they can consider based on their facts and circumstances in life. And we typically, help with this evaluation on an annual basis because each of their unique situations will change over time.
I think that's great. Understanding how much you can afford to give, that is definitely a big concern for clients. And through financial planning, we can really drill down and give people the confidence, which is really rewarding. So I have to say, as a wealth planner at Beacon Pointe, one of the happiest moments is to find out your client is able to do something on a philanthropic basis. Now, getting back again to the most common type of gift, which is direct giving, most of that occurs for our clients, just as Amy and Jill mentioned, because someone asked them, it's a jogathon gift, or your best friend is, part of a charitable committee. We do get asked, and there's nothing wrong, as Amy and Jill mentioned as well, to participate in that type of giving. And I think we'll always do that. But to the extent that you can be more strategic, we want to try to get a tax deduction and think about things. But what changed a couple of years back when the standard deduction, so the income tax deduction, the standard deduction increased, and also there were decreases in what you could deduct with state and local tax, there was a real shift in people not being able to take advantage of their charitable gifts and get a tax deduction because they weren't itemizing anymore. They were, in fact, just taking the standard deduction. So, Jade, can you talk a little more specifically about this issue and the advice you give to clients?
Yes. So for many individuals since the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, their overall deductions have been limited, as you were mentioning, meaning that their charitable deduction may not be giving them an additional tax benefit. So when we look at this chart here, what we focus on is the standard deduction, which has doubled over the past few years and will remain doubled for the next few years. The goal is that your overall deductions, and whether that's your state and local taxes, charitable donations, mortgage interest, that in one calendar year, you're exceeding the standard deduction. This may mean that you bunch your charitable deductions into 1 year versus multiple years. So if you typically give $5,000 or $10,000 a year to charity, maybe in 1 year give $50,000 and not give the next 4 years. So you maximize your itemized deduction in the first year, and then you take your standard deduction the next few years. This can really be evaluated with your financial planner and look to see how it's best to bunch these. But the main point is to put all of your charitable deductions into 1 year so that you can maximize the benefit.
And it's really surprising how many clients, particularly new clients that we meet with, are just missing out on this. And had they known, there's nothing worse than regret. Had they known they could have got a tax deduction, they definitely would have taken advantage of bunching their gifts. Now, bunching is awesome, but one of the things that I know clients worry about is they may want to see how their particular charity or charities actually uses those funds. Giving a couple of years of donations up front, you don't have the ability to maybe specify what you want future funds or how they may be used, or you may not have the ability to give to other charities. So can you talk a little bit about a solution there?
Yes. So one solution is a donor advised fund. This is a charitable giving vehicle that's offered by most public charities. A donor can open an account, make an irrevocable donation to that account. They get the tax deduction in the year that they donate to that account, and then they can recommend grants to charities over time. It's fairly simple, and it usually has no minimum donation required to open the account. And this would allow, in that same example as earlier, where if you were to make $50,000 donation in 1 year, you actually could choose to donate from your donor advised fund to the charity of your choice, say $5,000 or $10,000 over the next 5 to 10 years. So there are no distribution requirements, so that you have a lot of flexibility. So it allows you to focus on your charitable tax deduction in the year you contribute, and then stretching your gift over your time period.
And these are, as you mentioned, so easy to set up. And I would say about 20% of our clients have a donor advised fund.
And one other is that these donor advised funds can also help with legacy or succession planning. So you can recommend your family members or other individuals to act as your successors when you pass away. You can set up your grants not just during your life, but who to receive final grants when you pass away. Or again, you can allow your family members to continue making grants after. And then you can also set up recurring payments to charities over a specific time frame.
And very easy to use. Typically there's an app available and you just type in, search for the charity that you're looking to benefit, and distributions are made pretty quickly. So a great tool. Now, back to the different ways to give. So far, again, we've been talking about direct giving, but Jade will get into, how best to think about giving. What's another smart way to benefit from a tax standpoint when it comes to gifts you make during your life? And so it doesn't pertain to gifts after death, it's during your life, but it could be direct giving, it could be planned giving, but it really comes down to the asset. So, all right, Jade, let's talk about that.
As we've discussed, over 85% of charitable gifts are made in cash. However, if you look at your overall assets, typically stock or real property, and see that any of those assets have gains. Rather than selling an asset and having to pay the capital gains tax on that asset, you can actually donate a highly appreciated asset to a charity. And this is a double benefit. So in addition to the charitable tax deduction, you'll also avoid paying that capital gains tax too. And the charity doesn't pay capital gains taxes as a nonprofit as well. In a year, if you had a large gift in a particular year, there may be limitations to how much you can deduct, but these charitable deductions can be carried forward for 5 years as well. Overall, you're going to want to review your financial situation with your advisor and tax professionals to make sure the overall deduction you are claiming and what you're donating, and helping to find the most tax efficient asset.
And it's really surprising, again, with new clients that haven't been advised by their advisor on these issues, how common it is for people to just make gifts out of their checkbook when they miss out on that secondary benefit. So Jay came up with a great slide here that really shows the actual impact.
So here, if we're assuming we're combining many of the techniques we've discussed this far, so we're bunching our charitable donations into 1 year, we are probably contributing that to a donor advised fund, and we're contributing appreciated assets. You know, here using a $40,000 donation, if you were to pay capital gains tax to raise cash for your overall living expenses, including your charitable expenditures, it would be over $7,000 in capital gains. So in addition to getting that $40,000 charitable deduction for contributing it directly to the charity, you're also saving that $7,000. Overall, it's more than $10,000 in tax savings by combining these techniques.
Yeah, that really makes a difference and brings home that point. So talk to your advisor, because we definitely want to make sure that you're maximizing your impact and your deductions. Now, another question that we often get is, can I do something with my retirement account? Because we all know that retirement accounts are taxed a little differently, and we all have to take these required minimum distributions. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Yes, as our clients are reaching age 70, part of our overall review is what types of accounts, whether they're retirement accounts, outside of their retirement, and we're looking at their overall income and other factors. So for clients over age 70 and a half, and typically our clients that are over age 72, when they need to take required minimum distributions from retirement accounts, they can donate up to $100,000, and that goes directly from their IRA to a qualified public charity. There are some limitations that this donation cannot be made to a private foundation, it cannot be made to a donor advised fund or certain supporting organizations, but you could give it directly to your charity of choice. This satisfies your required minimum distribution. Otherwise, when that distribution comes out of your retirement account, it increases your income. And then you could take a charitable deduction, but we've discussed the issues with the higher standard deduction these days. So you can, by using a qualified charitable distribution, you're satisfying both your charitable goals and you're preventing that required distribution from being included in your taxable income. And this, while it seems like it would be a wash, by not increasing your taxable income because it bypasses your tax return, you're likely lowering your Medicare premiums, possibly reducing surtax on investment income, reducing tax on Social Security benefits, and there could be other income tax breaks.
And it is a complex consideration. So this is something you turn to either your accountant or your advisor to help run some numbers and see what works for you. But a powerful tool that many of our clients take advantage of. Now, I just wanted to bring up, we do more than the techniques that we just described. Those happen to be the top planning techniques that we discuss on a very regular basis with clients. But Jade, can you also just briefly mention some of the other strategies and when they may be used?
Yes, and the structure or depth of a plan will really vary based on each client's philanthropic goals, their frequency and amount of giving, and also balancing their individual heirs. How much do they want to give to individuals versus how much they want to give to charity, and finding the right technique. In many cases, these simple techniques will be sufficient, but there are clients with additional needs and they are looking for other options. These plans may exist within their will, another legally binding document such as a trust or other charitable giving vehicle. The main objective is to continue their donations with the maximum charitable impact while reducing their income and estate taxes. So with retirement planning strategies, we've already talked about the qualified charitable distribution, but when a client passes away and they are trying to take care of both charities and individuals, we may balance their asset types. And for those assets in a retirement plan, it could be more tax efficient because when a beneficiary withdraws from an inherited retirement account, there could be taxation, whereas a charity would not have any taxation on that distribution. For a private foundation, this is typically for our clients that are looking for a wealth transfer plan between their generations. They're focused on educating family members on their estate planning tools, laying the groundwork for the next generation of philanthropists. This can also help establish family traditions, personal values. They can work on this during life and then have it already structured when they pass away. We can also help our clients use a donor advised fund in many of these same ways as well. But some clients do prefer that family entity for their charitable giving.
And I would just
charitable trust.
Jade, I would just add on the private foundation front too. There are also situations such for Jill's situation where you really want to run it and be more involved with the charity that, something you couldn't do with a donor advised fund. So sorry to interrupt. Back onto charitable remainder trusts.
So with charitable trusts, this is another way to give, but they can typically are going to be more complex and expensive to not only set up, but maintain. For a charitable remainder trust, the donor or one of their loved ones would receive an income stream during life or a set term of years, and then the charity receives the remainder interest afterwards. In reverse, a charitable lead trust focuses on the charity first and then focuses on typically the donor's heirs and passing the remaining assets on to the next generation. When we're looking at these two types of trusts, for a charitable remainder trust, one area that we're looking at, does the client have significant appreciated stock? Because of certain tax benefits, they can defer or possibly eliminate capital gains on appreciated assets that they transfer to a charitable remainder trust. Or if they have excess assets but little income, we're going to look at charitable trust to provide that income stream while also maintaining their charitable giving. For a charitable lead trust, whether or not that receives a charitable deduction is going to be based on the structure of the charitable lead trust. But ultimately, most of our clients are looking to pass assets on to the next generation without utilizing gift or estate tax exemptions because of the charitable nature of those trusts. And finally, another is a gift annuity. This is similar to the charitable remainder trust, except for it's a contractual agreement with a charity to provide an annuity back to the donor over life, rather than structuring it with a trust. They're a little bit easier to explain, create, administer, but clients also look at the charitable remainder trust because it can have multiple charitable beneficiaries and the charitable beneficiary can be changed.
All right, well, that was a lot of information in a short period of time, but hopefully what you all walk away from on this is that we want to think very strategically about how you make your giving on an annual basis, and we're here to help. So I think now we have a little bit of time for some questions. So Jill, do you want to go ahead and lead that?
Sure. If anyone has any questions, please type them in the chat. I could start off because I've been reading the chat and answer a question or two. And if any of the other panelists have any comments, chime in. Somebody asked about how you find organizations to get involved with. So I suggested, and somebody else suggested, GuideStar is also a wonderful resource where you can search different organizations in your area based on their mission, their size, and other sorts of parameters. And you can read their financials. You can see somebody talked about trusting the organizations to spend the money the way you want them to. You can read all about that. So that's one organization, one way. The other is to just Google search. And if you're looking to get on a board and you don't know where to start, if you Google search your area for, I'm interested in climate change organizations in New York or wherever you are, you can look and see. And I would suggest certainly most smaller organizations would love to have help. You know, a lot of the larger organizations probably have big boards with big financial commitments. A lot of them do have that to be on the board. But you also can get in by just being on a committee without being on the board. You could serve on the marketing committee or the finance committee or the programming committee often without being on the board as well. And then the other thing is I would encourage you to use your own network. Maybe some of the people you know that are involved in the nonprofit world, often those people know other people involved and know other organizations. They could make an introduction for you. Do any of you all have any other suggestions? Otherwise, let's see what else.
On the chat, we have Rotary International, suggested as one of the highest rated nonprofit in the country, working, I think, help. Yeah, there's a lot of different opportunities there.
Yes.
iStar, so great option.
Yeah, I'd say, Jill, I think you covered that so well. I mean, the basic, the Google search, the talk to friends, family, members of your community, people that might have the same interest. And again, if you have an interest and you have an interest in animals and you want to work at the local shelter, you know, just sort of like follow your own interest, things like that.
You know, another point I'd bring up, most people on the verge of retirement are thinking about their next chapter, and it's one of the top things that retirees want to do is to volunteer their time. So I think this is also a great time to start doing, you know, evaluating what matters to you and looking into these issues if retirement is coming in the next couple of years. Start testing things out.
Right, the second chapter. I love that comment. All
right, well,
have any other questions? Otherwise,
maybe wrapping this up. And we're relatively on time. So thank you all for participating today. And thank you all, our guests as well. We appreciate your interactions. And we hope that each of you has taken away a little nugget, something to think about, to really be able to give in a more impactful basis, both for yourself and your families. So we'll see you the next time we have a Way National event. And also take a look at your local Beacon Point offices, because we also do in-person and Zoom different local events where you can really get to know the individuals at our firm and talk about all things that matter to women. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
thank you.